Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Citrus Insights. If you're new to watching Citrus Insights, the purpose of these videos is to shine a spotlight on a particular topic, spend a little bit more time, lift the bonnet, ideally with an industry expert to provide kind of help and information on a topic that maybe our clients are asking us about a bit more, or we think is perhaps not as well understood as some other products in the market. And in case you didn't know, this week happens to be National Income Protection Week. I'm sure everyone already knows that, but if you didn't, there we go. And it follows on quickly from a special day last week, which is, if you didn't know, was National Talk Like a Pirate Day. So do watch out for these special days. They're worth knowing about. But the whole week this week is National Income Protection Week. So what an amazing chance to spend much more time talking about all things income protection related. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome my special guest today, who is an expert in this area. So I'm delighted to welcome Julie Thompson, who is the Protection Proposition Manager at Scottish Widows. Julie has worked in protection for over 15 years, actually started in claims before moving over to her current role, which is within propositions at Scottish Widows. Her main focus is on protection, product innovation and development, but she also has a very keen interest in income protection, which has led to her being part of the Rising Stars workstream within the Income Protection Task Force. Wow, it sounds amazing, Julie. In addition to that, she's also instrumental in the design and development of the new and upcoming income protection products to be launched by Scottish Widows. So, Julie, what I can say is wow, and thank you so much for finding the time to come and talk with us today.
No problems. Thank you for having me, Richard. It's lovely to be here today.
Thank you. So I'm going to get straight into it with some questions for you. So let's start with some really kind of, hopefully, some fairly straightforward one, which is, kind of what is income protection and how does it differ from some of the other protection products that people may have heard before?
Yeah, so at its most simple, income protection is there to replace a percentage of lost earnings. So if you do find yourself in the unfortunate event of not being able to work, either due to illness or maybe an accident, then that's where it comes into play. It's normally payable on a monthly basis, similar to most people's wages, and it normally continues until you're well enough to return to work. Probably the key thing in saying is what income protection isn't, is it's not an unemployment benefit. As I say, it's normally there just to support if you're incapacitated as opposed to other reasons like maybe something like redundancy. And in terms of how it differs from the other products in the market, so typically you'll see life insurance, critical illness insurance. Now, that again normally pays a one-off lump payment as opposed to a monthly payment, and it's normally there in the event or payable in the event of either a specific diagnosis of a serious illness or in death as opposed to an inability to work. I think it's also worth just noting before moving on that reality is when it comes to insurance, most people will insure their car, their house, and certainly everyone insures their pets. But we do tend to forget to protect the very thing that allows us to have all these things in place, which is where income protection can really add that value.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's a great start. So we have a good baseline understanding now of how this differs and what it is. And I suppose it leads us nicely on to, knowing that and hearing your point around unemployment, hearing your point that isn't covered and hearing your point around monthly benefits. So who would really benefit the most from income protection? And perhaps, are there specific circumstances where it really is particularly valuable?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say actually pretty much everyone. It's unique in the sense that the product is almost universally appropriate for most people of working age. Even in the circumstances where somebody maybe doesn't own a house and is renting, because that rent would still need covered if they're unable to work, or the younger person who wishes to maintain a certain lifestyle in the event they're unable to work due to sickness or accident, or even those who are thinking about retirement or investments and want to protect that if they are unable to work. In terms of who might really benefit, I think this is where the likes of self-employed people can really come into play here. So the difference there is if they aren't able to work, they're not earning. And when you consider that statutory sick pay is just shy of £117 a week, that's just simply not sufficient for most people to live on. So I definitely think that's where income protection can add that, again, that real value.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that to life. And it's quite scary just pondering on those numbers that you've given and thinking about, just for most people, what those typical monthly outgoings are, and kind of how that pay links, and what the shortfall is. So okay, so now we understand who can benefit, perhaps who it's particularly valuable for. And then I guess when people are thinking about this, they may be saying, well, okay, now I've got that. What factors should I be thinking about when I'm deciding what cover I really need when it comes to income protection?
Yeah, so the way the claim payments piece works is it's based on a percentage of how much you were earning just before you were unable to work. So that's kind of like the first sort of consideration in that, like how much you're earning. There are different methods on how to calculate a person's benefit depending on whether they're employed or whether they're self-employed. So it's really important that you fully understand the differences when arriving at how much cover you might need. And again, that's where advisors can talk through the process and give that kind of support as it's needed. I suppose another factor worth considering as well are the other incomes that you may have, and what would you do if, say, suddenly you weren't earning that money? So do you have savings? Do you have other insurance, for example? Again, your advisor should be able to guide you in terms of what's appropriate, but I would suggest most people who have savings have worked really hard for them and don't want to have to rely on them. Which again is where income protection can help and even allow you to continue saving or paying towards a pension or an investment at times. Another key consideration is the sick pay. So I've already talked about statutory sick pay and the fact it's only just shy of £117 a month. And if you're self-employed, you aren't going to be lucky enough to receive sick pay, unlike employed people. And even then, depending on your employer and length of service, sick pay can vastly vary. So it's important that this is considered along with the amount of cover that you get under the income protection.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. And I think, Julie, I heard another interesting thing there, which is, you know what, there is a lot of information available here for people that are thinking, okay, this is something I want to explore more, but where do I start? So you just talked about, advisors that can help. There's lots of professionals out there that can help. The internet is full of, places to go. So it's there are people who can help, I guess, is always the message we like to give here. Don't think you need to try and go it alone. You can talk to people for help. And I guess whenever we talk about protection and insurance, I like to talk about some of the misconceptions because you tend to hear lots of stories. So from your perspective, what do you hear when you're the expert in this type of area? What are the typical kind of common misconceptions that are worth talking about?
Sure. So, I think that's a really interesting one because I highly suspect that you'll get a different answer every time you ask this question. But to me, probably the two main ones that I see in here is one being the cost and the expectation that income protection is expensive. And the other one being, and this I guess probably relates to all insurance, is that providers simply just don't want to pay claims. On the cost one, when you look at some of the portal data out there, the average premium for income protection is actually only £40 a month. Now, I'm not going to pretend that that is cheap for everyone, and it's certainly not as cheap as, say, like life insurance. But as I've already mentioned, income protection provides a very different benefit, and to my mind, a very valuable benefit as well. And to me, that feels like that's worth that slightly extra amount of money. There is also ways to reduce the cost of the cover as well, such as opting for a limited claim benefits income protection product. And another way would be to reduce that cost. Would be to pick like a longer waiting period, for example, as this is normally cheaper. The only thing about that is that needs to be balanced and considered by the fact that that means that you might not be getting that claim payment when, say, your sick pay ends. So again, as you've touched on, this is where that good advice and having that understand is really helpful. On the claims myth, as I say, income protection is certainly not immune to people thinking insurance companies don't want to pay. However, the data just doesn't really support that. I mean, what we know from the ABI is that nearly 88% it was of income protection claims for 2023 were paid. And having come from claims myself, so I do have that first-hand experience, I can tell you my first thought was always, how do we pay this claim? Not how do we not pay this claim? And trust me when I tell you this, it's such an easier conversation to have with that customer when you're going to pay that money. So that's certainly one of the biggest myths out there.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's kind of good to reinforce it with those Association of British Insurers stats. That's really powerful, thank you. And I just want to pick up on one thing you talked about there, just to ask them just one more question on, which is waiting periods. Can you just articulate a little bit more about what a waiting period is, just for viewers who may not be familiar with that?
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, the short, like the way they work is essentially, I guess it's probably prudent to say that the ethos of income protection is to support you when you don't have an income, so you're not earning any money. And for someone who's employed, this is normally easier to work out because it tends to follow a set rule. So, for example, 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. However, I appreciate that might not always be the case. For example, if you're newly employed, there could be a period of time where sick pay is, for example, built up, which is why it's important that we keep reviewing our income protection to make sure it's suitable. And where the waiting period comes in is it's that period of time whilst you're hopefully receiving some sick pay where no income payment is payable. And the idea should be is that the moment that sick pay ends and you're on reduced earnings or even no earnings, that's where that income protection can come into play and start paying you that monthly benefit. So in other words, you prevent that loss of ongoing income coming in on a monthly basis.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking back to the point you made earlier actually about savings. And I think that's a really interesting one for me because you hear stories and you meet people who are saving really hard, working hard, saving hard, and there might be a kind of belief of, well, it's okay because if I need to call on that, I'll just call on my savings. Until they're faced with that position where the work they've really put in to build that pot up, they're then, with the thought they're going to maybe holiday or whatever it might be, or maybe it is emergency, but for a lot of people, it's probably not just so as they can live to replace an income, it's to do other stuff with. So it's a great concept to have those savings that you're going to use them right up until the point when you have to go and withdraw them to do your day-to-day bills. So I think it's thank you for just reminding people of how important it is to investigate all of those options that are open to them to save having to do that. And I guess, having used, so you will have come across lots of clients in lots of different situations. So if I'm thinking about income protection, what are the other things people should consider when they're thinking about income protection?
Yes, so I think one of the sort of growing areas in income protection, and actually indeed kind of all insurance, protection insurance in general, is in relation to what we call added value services. So these services range from provider to provider, but in general, they offer things such as access to mental health support services, rehabilitation services, even physiotherapy. And something which has been growing in popularity in the last few years, namely, let's be honest, due to sort of the documented strain that's going on in the NHS, is access to 24/7 access to GP appointments. So that allows an individual, and in some cases partners, children, again, varies from provider to provider, to be able to make that or make that phone call or arrange that sort of online appointment with a qualified GP any time of day, any day. Doesn't even have to, you can be on holiday in Spain and something happens, heaven forbid, you need to speak to someone. And it just can give that reassurance as well. So I think these are all really super valuable services to have. Like with most things, the service packages, like I say, it does differ from provider to provider. Some providers may charge for certain services as well, so it's worth looking around, understanding what's available. However, from the services we provide at Scottish Widows, I would say is we do see some really positive feedback from the customers that do use them. And I can only see this area growing more and more and being more and more important to the products that we provide, including income protection.
That's a great bit of information, Julie. Thank you. And a useful reminder of people when they're thinking about this and they're exploring it, think about what those extra benefits might be, and I guess that's the very nature of it. A benefit will be something that works for them, not just a feature, but actually they go, actually, that one's important to me. And if that was included, that'd be fantastic. So when you're talking to your advisor, when you're investigating the different income protection products, yeah, please do, think about those things that would make a difference to you. Dude, that's incredibly helpful. You're clearly super knowledgeable over this product, and we thank you so much for all the time you've given and for all of your information. So thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you again for having me. Lovely speaking to you today.
So that's it for today on Citrus Insights. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks very much, and bye for now.